the Chinese government was able to identify coronavirus and understand it as a novel virus as of January 1st, 2020. They shared that information with the Centers for Disease Control in the United States. The Trump administration and US intelligence agencies knew full well what the Chinese were describing. After the SARS epidemic and the MERS epidemic, Ebola, swine flu, there was a recognition that a new potential pandemic was on the way. The US Senate was informed, at least principal leaders of the US Senate were informed of the potentially catastrophic impact of this pandemic as of January 24th, 2020. It was at that time that Senator Richard Burr, Senator Dianne Feinstein, Senator Loeffler began selling huge amounts of their own personal stock because they knew then that the economy could well tank, that the stock market and different companies and corporations that they were heavily invested in could also be on the way down. During that entire period, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Donald Trump, the Democratic Party, all of them spent the entire time demonizing China, attacking China, using the most racist, stereotyping caricatures of China. Every proactive measure by China, including the quarantining of Wuhan and Hubei province, a province of 70 million people, when there were only 530 cases, was described in the US media as an expression or as an example of authoritarianism, and contrasted it with the wonderful freedom that the United States purports to represent and that the American people supposedly enjoy. And so for 2 months, starting on January 1st, 2020, US government officials and the media, and some of the senior members of the media knew too what was coming, wasted all of this precious time. Instead of making ventilators, making masks, building hospitals as China did, they built 14 hospitals in 10 days. Instead of doing that which was necessary to prepare this country for the pandemic, they spent all of their time either selling stock based on insider knowledge or giving palliative messages from the White House, where Donald Trump, the president, told the American people, relax, we have this under control, no problem. I'm very good at science. That's what the scientific officials tell me. I'm really good at this. He refused to take any proactive measures at all, nor did the US Congress. During that time, by the way, and Trump is using this as part of his own sort of rationale or justification for his own criminal malfeasance, the US Senate was engaged in the impeachment trial of Donald Trump, not for something like this, not for his endemic racism, not for his xenophobia or misogyny or anti-LGBTQ bigotry, not for any of the things that Donald Trump should be impeached for. They were impeaching him for a call that he had with Ukraine's head of state and for his temporary delay of sending high quality, very advanced weapons to Ukraine that could only stimulate a greater war inside of Ukraine. The entire political establishment, the Democrats, the Republicans, the White House, the mass media, focused on everything but that which was most important, which was to prepare the country and the people for the reality of this coronavirus crisis. Do you remember Commerce Secretary billionaire Wilbur Ross going on TV and saying, coronavirus will actually be a good thing? It'll be good for American jobs, Wilbur Ross said. Do you remember that? He said, because if China and Chinese economy is slowed down, that'll stimulate productivity and jobs coming back to America. Wilbur Ross, the great visionary. Yeah, this has been really, really great for jobs. As Gloria pointed out in the beginning, just in the last week, 10 million people, that's 10 million families who have been pushed into unemployment. And unlike France or Denmark or Sweden, where the government assumes the burden to make sure that every worker retain their salary and that every worker retain their job, the same capitalist government that through its malfeasance and negligence did nothing to prepare the country now says to everybody, sorry, you're on your own. We're going to pass a $6 trillion package, and that's what it really is with the $4 trillion backstop from the Federal Reserve, most of which will be an infusion to the already biggest banks and corporations, to the already super rich in the United States. Meanwhile, millions of families right now don't know what life is going to look like next week or next month. For our comrades who are domestic workers, for those comrades who are domestic workers who are here because they were trafficked, labor trafficked, who have been now fired by their elite bosses in New York City, the same bosses who fled to Florida, along with the directors of some of the biggest hospitals, by the way. Those comrades, those workers who the rich depend on, they raise their kids, they do their groceries, they do their housework. Those workers have nothing right now. They're not eligible for unemployment. Nobody's taking care of them. They're living 3 or 4 to a room. These are workers who are largely undocumented, but who are considered essential by the rich. They can't even socially or physically distance. That becomes a privilege that they are denied because of their status as trafficked workers. Those folks, these comrades, are just days away from absolute starvation. And inside the PSL and amongst others, we're doing everything to provide emergency relief for them and for others in the working class who are on the brink of destruction, who are facing absolute and utter ruin. But even our own efforts or the efforts of other progressive organizations are not enough. It's like a drop in the ocean. The state, the government has immense resources. It has an immense apparatus. As Gloria mentioned, they've sent the naval destroyers to the east coast of Venezuela, spending money, billions of dollars to threaten Venezuela, increasing sanctions on Venezuela and Iran, instead of using the money to bail out the working class in America, which is the essential class. You know, when you think about it, who's saving the patients in the hospitals? It's the nurses and the healthcare workers and the doctors. Who's delivering the food? Who's at the cashiers and stocking the shelves? Who's in the Amazon and FedEx warehouses? The working class is the essential class, the entire working class. The bourgeoisie, on the other hand, is an invisible class. If Jeff Bezos doesn't go to work today or any day, and I'm using work with air quotes, he still reaps hundreds of millions of dollars of profit, but Jeff Bezos does nothing. But if the Amazon workers don't come to work, everybody will know about it. If the Whole Food workers don't come to work, if the Instacart workers don't come to work. The working class is the essential class. What we're saying here in the PSL is workers make the world run, and workers should run the world, because we can see right now that workers, in fact, are running the world. The only thing that the workers don't have is property rights over the collective means of production. Instead, the means of production that are collectively built, collectively labored at, are still privately owned by the big capitalists. And so, of course, when the government comes to bail out society, as Eugene pointed out so well, they're not bailing out the people. They're not bailing out the working class. They're not bailing out the essential class. They're bailing out a superfluous class that does nothing but owns everything. We have to say to the American workers and to the US working class in general, this government which carried out the activities of the government in the past 3 months should be condemned, impeached, and jailed for criminal malfeasance. What they did is costing the lives of thousands of workers. That's not rhetoric. Donald Trump and the Congress, by their delay, by their insidious efforts to delay and obscure what was actually going on, or in the case of the senators to profit from insider trading, they are actually guilty of murder. They knew what was coming and they did nothing. We have to build a socialist movement in the United States. We in the PSL are building a socialist movement. We're going into an era where not only are people's lives at stake and thousands, hundreds of thousands may and probably will die, but millions of people have had their entire potential future plans put aside because people now don't even know how they're going to pay rent in a month. They don't know how they're going to maintain a foreclosure or prevent a foreclosure. People are at that level of risk. In the 1930s, there was no such thing as unemployment insurance or Social Security or even the right to organize a union. These were rights that were won in 1934, 35, 36, when thousands and millions of job actions took place, when workers seized factories in the sit-down strikes, when there were general strikes in Toledo and San Francisco and Minneapolis, when the socialist and communist movement grew strong, when the Communist Party went from a small organization in 1929 to being an organization with 100,000 members and probably 1 million supporters all around the country. The reason we won those reforms like Social Security and unemployment insurance was not because Franklin Delano Roosevelt decided to give a gift to the masses, as Roosevelt made the point to the bourgeoisie that wanted to make no concession. I'm not trying to save the workers, I'm trying to save capitalism by making these necessary concessions. That's what we have to do now. We have to build a new workers' movement. We have to strengthen our unions. We have to build a large-scale socialist movement and a socialist party. That's what we're doing inside the PSL. We have entered a new period of intense class struggle, and to be able to win this class struggle, we must be organized. We must organize everywhere. Our organization now has an organized presence in 93 cities and towns around the country. People are flocking to join the PSL right now. I'm sure they're flocking to join other working class and progressive organizations. We have to build the movement. Let's not be spectators watching TV or going to the Wall Street Journal to see how the Dow Jones Industrial Average is doing today. We don't care about the Dow Jones Industrial Average. We care about the lives of working class people. This society has all that which is needed to make sure that the working class does not bear the burden of a crisis that the working class did not cause. Yes, coronavirus is the natural development. Viruses are part of nature. But what happened here in the United States was not natural. This was, quote, man-made. It was man-made by a class. The class has a name. The class is called the capitalist class, and the state and the government have run for its benefit. We have to turn that around. Thank you very much.